The Sorcerers of Westman Islands. When the Black Death Plague raged in Iceland, a group of sorcerers decided to escape death by moving to the Westman Islands. When they expected the plague to have passed, they needed to know if there were any survivors, so they appointed one of them to go to the mainland and find out. He was told to return before Christmas, or they would send him a fatal shipment. The man went far and wide, but couldn't find any survivors. All the houses were open, and corpses were lying all about. Finally he came to a closed house, and in it was a young and pretty woman. She also had searched long and wide without success, and was relieved to find that she was not alone. She invited him to stay, and so he did. When Christmas grew near, the man explained to her that he must return or face the consequences. Still, the woman managed to persuade him to stay. On Christmas night, a shipment in the form of a fly arrives searching for the man. The woman, recognizing the danger, managed to trick the fly and capture it. Although they could celebrate for the moment, they knew that this was just the beginning. So at the start of a new year, the woman asks the man to come visit an old man bringing the captured fly with her. The man released the fly, rubbed it gently, making it colossal in size, and instructed it to go to the Westman Islands and intercept all future shipments from the sorcerers, saving the man. The man and the woman later married, had children, and prospered. Having created the heavens and the earth, God reflected on his creation and felt he had done a good job. But old Nick did not agree. He resented the beauty of the world. In his anger, he decided to urinate at the sun to darken this glorious gem of creation. This did not turn out as planned, though, because from old Nick's waste, Lake Mývatn in northern Iceland was formed. An ugly lake where swarms of gnats that give the lake its name are still worse and are a torture for men and animals around the lake. The Lake Lagarfljót worm. Long ago, in a cottage near Lake Lagarfljót, a woman gave her daughter a gold ring. "How can I benefit the most from this ring, dear mother?" asked the daughter. "Place it under a heather worm," the woman replied. So the girl puts the gold ring inside a box with the worm on top. A few days later, the worm has almost outgrown the box. Frightened, the girl throws the box with everything in it into the lake. In the lake, the worm grew enormously, later causing harm to humans and animals crossing the river. Sometimes it stretched over the riverbank, spewing horrible venom. Not knowing what to do, 2 Finns were assigned to kill the worm and retrieve the gold. They were unsuccessful, but found another worm much worse underneath the gold. They managed to restrain the worm, but still it occasionally makes its presence known in the lake, and that is usually regarded as a bad omen. The foolish brothers of Baki. The brothers of Baki have been told that it was good for one's health to intermittently dip one's feet into warm water. However, because of their ongoing low firewood supply, they didn't want to spend it on warming up water. Once they came across a small pool or hot spring on their journey. They immediately seized the opportunity to bathe their feet, sitting close together in a circle. When they were ready to stop bathing, none of them could tell his feet from the others. They were perplexed by this for a while. They didn't dare move because they might make the wrong selection and take each other's feet. So they sat there until a passerby emerged. They called to him and pleaded him to identify their feet. The man walked to them and hit their legs with his stick, thus helping all of them to find their own. The Convent of Kirkjubaich. A convent of nuns was formed at Kirkjubaich, Churchtown, in 1186. It was situated below a somewhat steep mountain that had a lake on top. One day, 2 sisters made their way to the lake, and it is said that they saw a golden comb reaching from the water. One of the nuns tried to reach it but drowned. The other one found a horse nearby and went on it into the water, but they drowned too. None of them have been seen since, and the lake has since been called Sistravach, Sister Lake. Nearby, there is a large pillar of rock that can only be mounted using one narrow path. It has a flat top with two hummocks that are believed to be the graves of the sisters. For this, the pillar is called Sistra Stapi, Sisters' Rock. A contemporary convent of monks was in a nearby community. It is said that the abbot and the monks from the convent had a habit of visiting the nuns. When they reached a hill on the way, from where they first could sight their destination, they always started singing, and this hill has since been called Shung Hot, Singer's Hill. When they were heard coming, the abbess would call for the ringing of the bells, and she and the sisters would walk to meet them at a place later called Glynnarach, Spreaders. There was much jubilation every time the monks came on a visit, and rumor has it that the monks came primarily to fool around with the nuns. The sisters and the abbess were all aware of this, and stories can still be told of this. One night, when the monks were on a visit, the abbess was up checking on the sisters. When she was about to reprimand a nun she had found in bed with a monk, the nun said, "What is that you have on your head, dear mother?" Discovering that she had mistakenly grabbed the abbot's underpants, she walked away, saying, "We are all sinners, sister." Redhead. In ancient times it was common to go by boat to a remote skerry to catch birds and eggs. This journey was dangerous and could only be done in calm weather. On one such occasion, a man had to be left behind because the weather suddenly turned for the worse. This also proved to be the last time that summer that the journey to the skerry could be made because of continuing bad weather and high seas. The man was therefore believed dead. Surprisingly, during the first trip the following summer, the man was found to be still alive and well. It did not look like he had spent a particularly hard time there, but he did not give any explanation as to why. He was brought back home to a joyous reunion. Late that summer, at a mass, a cradle was found standing outside the church. In it was an infant, no one claimed to know, covered with a sumptuous blanket. However, because of the mystery surrounding the man's survival, the priest asked him if he knew any details and whether this child should be baptized. The man replied coldly that he knew nothing. At that moment, a pretty woman suddenly appears, grasps the blanket, throws it into the church, and says, "The church shall be none the worse for it." She then angrily turns to the man and tells him that he will become a whale of the worst kind. Finally, she disappears with the baby in the cradle and was never seen again. The man became mad and transformed into a whale with a red head, like the color of the man's cap, lending it the name Redhead. Later, the man's mother is believed to have told about her son's whereabouts at the skerry. He supposedly was housed by a pretty elf woman. He wanted to go back home, though, and she permitted him to, on the condition that he would have their unborn child baptized when she brings it to him to church, or else suffer grim consequences. Back to Redhead. It went on to sink many ships, drowning many men, and no one could stop it. But having killed 2 of his sons, an old priest decides to try. With the aid of his daughter and a stick, he managed to have Redhead follow him far inland, up rivers and waterfalls, to a lake that is now called Whale Lake. This ordeal proved too much for Redhead, though, and it has not been seen since, but colossal whale bones found at this lake lend truth to this story. Yora of Yoracliff. Yora was a promising but short-tempered young woman, the daughter of a farmer. One day she watched her father's stallion, of which she was very fond, humiliated in a competition. She became so mad that she ripped one leg off the other horse and ran away with it. When she reached a nearby river, she grabbed a huge boulder from the cliffs close by and threw it into the middle of the river. Leapfrogging the river, she uttered, "Virginity is ripe. It's fitting to marry." She then went into the mountains, where she settled in a place later called the Cave of Yora. She would wreak havoc among men and animals, frequently ambushing them at a gorge later called Yoracliff, robbing or killing them once she had finished eating the horse. This would go on for a long time, making the area almost uninhabitable, as no one had the strength to subdue her. Now, with no means to confront Yora, a young man emerged. On one of his many travels to Norway, he met the king, told him the story of Yora, and asked for his advice. The king told him that he should go to Yora at sunup on Whitsunday, because there is no creature so vile or powerful that it isn't sleeping then, said the king. The king then handed him a silver-decorated axe and said, "You will find her sleeping face down. Strike this axe between her shoulder blades. Yora will wake up and say, 'Let hands be fixed to shaft.' You will then reply, 'Let axe separate from the shaft.' These words will cause Yora to stumble into the nearby river with the axe still present. Eventually, the axe blade will drift into a river where Icelanders will form their parliament." The young man gave his thanks to the king for the advice and the axe. He then returned to Iceland and killed Yora. The axe later drifted into a river that hence was called Axe River, Oxar-Á, where Icelanders would form their parliament. God bless you. God bless me is commonly used when one sneezes, or God bless you when someone else does. This custom originated during the plague in the beginning of the 15th century. It had spread to yet another province, continuing to claim lives. Eventually it reached a farm where two siblings lived. They had noticed that all those who had died first developed a bad sneeze. Because of this, they started praying for God to protect themselves and each other every time they sneezed. As it turned out, they were the only survivors in the whole province. Therefore, everyone should always ask for God's blessing having sneezed, and then no one will die because of it. Gilitrut. Once upon a time, there was a hard-working young and well-to-do sheep farmer. He had just married a young, shiftless woman. She was lazy and did not respond well to her husband's requests to process wool. This annoyed the man. One day, an old woman appeared and asked the wife a favor. "Can you do something for me in return?" asked the wife. "Maybe. What may that be?" replied the woman. The wife handed the woman a large sack of unprocessed wool, given to her by her husband, and asked her to process it. "I'll do as you ask and deliver it to you on the first day of summer. But instead, you must guess my name." The wife agreed to this. Now winter passes, and the farmer keeps asking his wife how she is doing in the processing of the wool. At first she tells him that it will be ready by summer, but then she starts to worry because she has no means to find the old woman's name. She therefore tells her husband the full story, and he becomes worried and tells her that this old woman is a hag that will eventually abduct her. Later during winter, the farmer was out walking when he came across a large rocky hill. Suddenly he notices a big woman singing and gloating inside the hill through a small crevice, repeating the same sentence, "Ho, ho, ho, Gilitrut is my name, and no one will know." The farmer, much relieved, was confident that this was the woman her wife had met the autumn before. He then returned home, but does not tell his wife the news. It's not until the last day of winter that the man tells his worried wife the name he heard. He then leaves his wife to meet the old hag alone, as she did in the beginning. The wife is in bed when the hag arrives on the first day of summer. Slinging her processed wool on the floor, the hag asks the wife for the name. Fearing for her life, the wife finally replies with the correct name. The hag was so surprised that she fell to the floor with a loud bang, stood up, left, and was never seen again. The wife was so relieved that she totally changed her ways, became hard-working and efficient, and always processed her wool herself. The Deacon of Dark River. A deacon at Dark River had a relationship with a servant girl at a nearby farm. After one of his visits to her, he told her he would be back the day before Christmas to take her to a Christmas party. Unfortunately, on his way home, a bridge collapsed from under his horse's feet, and the deacon was killed by a severe blow to his head. The horse was found the day after. Because of the winter conditions, the news did not reach the girl, and on the day before Christmas, a visitor knocked on her door. In the twilight, a cloaked figure could be seen sitting on the deacon's horse. Certain that this was the deacon, the girl sat behind him on the horse, and off they went. It's not clear whether any words were spoken. Later, because of the rough trail, the girl could momentarily see a bare skull behind the deacon's hood. She utters no words, and they continue to his home. While the deacon takes the horse away, she discovers an empty grave nearby. She becomes very afraid and tries to ring the church bells. Immediately the deacon grasps her cloak and disappears with it into the grave that then closes. The girl was fortunate to have had her arms in but one of the sleeves that got ripped off and was left behind by the deacon. In the following days and weeks, the deacon's ghost continued to haunt the girl. This would only stop after a sorcerer managed to put an end to the haunting. Crossroads. Some say that crossroads are, for example, on hilltops or mountains, from where 4 churches can be seen. Old belief is that men should spend Christmas night outside because then a new year begins, and still today one counts his years by the numbers of Christmas nights. A man having lived 15 Christmas nights is said to be one of 15 winters. Eventually, New Year's Eve marked the beginning of a new year. When men sit at a crossroad, elves from all around will join in and try to persuade you to go with them, but one must not abide. They will then offer one all kinds of things, gold and silver, clothes, food and drink, but one must not accept anything. Elves disguised as one's mother or sister will ask you to come with them. Every trick in the book is tried. But come the new day, one must stand up and say, "Praise the Lord, a new day fills the air." Then all the elves will disappear, leaving their wealth behind for one to keep. But if one answers or accepts any offer from an elf, one becomes enchanted and goes mad and will never again be at rest. Once, a man called Fusi sat out on Christmas night and had resisted temptation for a long time, until an elf woman brought with her something to eat. Fusi turned his head and said what since has become a widely used phrase. "Rarely have I refused the delicious tallow." He then took a bite and went mad and became crazy. Bukotla, the canny cow. Once upon a time, there was a man and a woman that lived in a cottage. They had one son, but they did not love him. They had one cow called Bukotla. One day the cow disappeared. After a fruitless search, the man and the woman angrily ordered the boy to go and search for the cow, not to return without it. The boy searched long and hard. Whenever he stopped to eat, he called, "Moo now, my dear Bukotla, if you are anywhere alive." He could hear the cow move far away, although nearer each time. Finally, he could hear it move beneath his feet, where he found it tied up in an enormous cave. He hastily untied the cow, and off they went for home. The boy soon discovered that a huge ogre was pursuing them, drawing closer in every stride. Frightened, he asked the cow, "What should we do now, dear Bukotla?" The cow replied, "Take one hair from my tail and put it on the ground." The cow then said to the hare, "I say and so demand that you will turn into so large a maze that no one can pass but the flying bird." Instantly, the hare transformed into a huge maze. When the ogre reached the maze, it called for its big bull and had it engulf all the maze. Again, the boy had to seek assistance from Bukotla, this time transforming a tail hair into a fire so large that no one could pass but the flying bird. When the ogre reached the fire, it had the big bull put out the fire by urinating on it, returning all the water from the maze. Yet again the boy had to seek assistance from Bukotla, this time transforming a tail hair into a mountain range so large that no one could pass but the flying bird. When the ogre reached the mountains, it used its father's big drill to make a tunnel. But in its haste to enter the tunnel, it failed to notice how narrow it was and got stuck, later turning into stone, where it still is. But the boy made it safely home with the cow, making the man and the woman quite happy. A Crow's Tale. A farmer's daughter had the custom of feeding a crow outside her home at mealtime. At one time, the raven did not take what she handed to it from the window. This surprised the girl, and she went outside to feed it. Although always likely to eat, the raven retreated further and further from the house. Suddenly, a loud noise was heard from above the house, followed by a landslide surrounding them on both sides, not reaching them, but engulfing the house and everything in it, living and dead. Thus the raven rewarded the girl for the feeding. It is said that a bishop once had his tent raised on the spot where they were standing, blessing it as well. 3 years later, a shepherd's horse stumbled on the ruins where a woman had been entrenched in the pantry. As the avalanche had taken place in the autumn, she had enough food to survive all this time.